The Nashville Predators have 3 picks in the first round of the 2025 NHL Draft, and today we'll explain why the one thing the Predators absolutely should not do on draft night is try to trade up.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Tuesday episode shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and, of course, our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio. And friends, I have 2 partners in crime today.
You do. I am Emma Lingan, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News. And our other partner in crime, of course, if you are a everyday listener / viewer, you're very familiar with Upper Management. She is here today to make sure that we stay in line because goodness knows we can use that.
Yes, and I've already got one tick against me. We've had to go back and edit this because I wished everybody a happy Thursday. You all, it's Tuesday. What am I doing? What is even I'm not even in the ballpark.
I mean, we can still wish them a happy Thursday and a couple days from now. Also, I would just like to update everyone on what's happening off screen. Upper Management is chasing her tail furiously right now. So if I seem a little distracted, I apologize.
Yes, and if I wished you a happy Thursday by accident, please tuck that in your pocket and pull it out in a couple of days because I will mean it then too. Of course, on Monday's show, as it were, we got to hear from Jeff Kelty. He is the assistant general manager and director of scouting for the Nashville Predators, and he kind of shared with us the team's philosophy and their process as they get ready for this draft. The Predators, they have 3 first-round draft picks. Starting with pick number 5 overall, it's an opportunity to cash in on not only a disappointing Nashville Predators season, but a ton of draft capital. Today, we're going to talk about, though, the one thing that Emma and I absolutely do not want the Nashville Predators to do on draft night. And friends, that is trade up. This is something that we touched on briefly on Monday's show, Emma, but I think it's worth diving into because the idea of trading up in a draft where there are, in theory, kind of step back, big picture, kind of 2 main standout players, a defenseman and a forward / center. People tend to think, oh gosh, at 5, you've got to be better than 5. How do you feel about that take?
Well, I feel I should apologize because I definitely jumped the gun on this take yesterday. And on Monday, yesterday was Monday, just a reminder.
It was not Wednesday. Yeah.
I did jump the gun and I started talking about this because I feel very strongly about it. It is something that a lot of people, a lot of Predators fans, upon seeing that they got the worst mathematical scenario in the draft lottery, that worst scenario equals objectively bad. And that's not necessarily true. It is, relatively bad, but it's still better than the Predators have had in many years. It's the highest they've picked in 2013. I still, people do this all the time where they think it's just like, oh, you got to get this guy or this guy. And if you don't, then it's just a barren wasteland of
mediocrity.
Exactly. So it's just like, there's nothing. First of all, when did all of you people saying this become draft experts? Because I've never heard this before. Second of all, it's just not true. Yeah. If you're picking in the top 5, you're still going to get a really good pick. And so I think now when talking about trading up, if there was a scenario in which you package those because they have 3 first-round picks. If you package those second and third to move up somehow, I don't know who would want that, but I mean, anything can happen. That I'd be fine with. Or you trade those picks in, you use them in a trade where you can get a hockey asset in return, like a player, then maybe that's something you do. But to trade when you have the number 5 pick, what you would have to give up to move into the top 3 is not worth it. I just don't think it is.
I had mentioned on yesterday's show, this may be a draft where the best way to frame it up is quantity is to your benefit. And because people, and here is what I think it is, Emma, and I think this one thing is true for Nashville Predators fans. And I understand it, but I think so much, especially right now for Nashville Predators fans, is viewed through the lens of if we just had a 1C. It is the deep yearning of the Nashville Predators fans' hearts that this team has so many pieces except the 1C. And then when you have an opportunity for a really high draft pick, you think this is the one chance we have to get a 1C because, friends, they are very hard to come by. They are called an elite 1C because they are elite and hard to come by. And you feel like this is our chance. If we could have only in the draft lottery got the first or second pick, then we could have gotten it. And its name is Michael Misa, because that is the offensive player's name that stands out. That is the player whose stats are really dynamic. Now, let me assure you, friends, that there are other offensive weapons in this draft whose stats are as dynamic in their respective league for what they are doing. But I think so much of the we should trade up is that, are we ever going to get this high of a draft pick again? Is Nashville going to end up right back in the mushy middle of not just the Central Division, but of the draft? And this is our chance. And there's one guy that's considered, the guy to get, and we better trade up. And so I think that desire for a 1C, it colors so much of all of the discussion in Nashville, whether it is the draft, whether it is free agency, whether it is signing aged veterans or developing players. There is this, we just need the 1C. We just need the 1C, Emma. We just need the 1C. And I get it. Like, I get why people feel that way. Here's the other thing that doesn't help is that Barry Trotz towards the end of the season was asked on the radio, do you know who you would draft right now? And he said, oh yeah, I do. I know who I would draft. Now, he won't give a name. I mean, he may have stream of consciousness, but Barry Trotz ain't squealing on that. But I know, like, when you hear that, you think, well, he's certainly not in his heart going, I want the guy that's ranked 13th. You know he's thinking top guy. So I just think so much goes into feeling the pressure that this is the chance. And if we blow this chance, we're never going to get a 1C, Emma.
And I get that because this is such a different position for the Predators to be in. So I do understand that. But I also think that, like you said, Barry isn't sitting there like, ooh, I'm going to outsmart everyone. And this guy who's projected to go 24th, I'm going to pick him at number 5. That'll show them. Like, no, of course he's not doing that. And so I think, a lot of the angst among Predators fans, and deservedly so, understandably so, is like, well, they're bad at drafting. They don't know how to draft. They can't draft and develop forwards. Fine. We'll go with that for a second. But all of the forwards that they've drafted have not come in the top 5. It is the higher they pick in the draft. Like, when you're in the top 5, it's going to be so hard for them to screw this up. It's harder. Yeah. It's more challenging when you're picking in the middle and there's a less clear hierarchy, because then, if you're picking 21st, then maybe you take a flyer on a guy. There's a little bit more ambiguity there on, like drafting the best available versus what you need. And I think that that's what people are concerned about. And I get it. And I'm sure I know there are a lot of people out there saying like, oh, they'll still find a way to mess this up. And to those people, I say, maybe just find some joy in your life. Maybe go touch grass or something. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying like maybe stop letting this hockey team control your happiness. Just a
Well,
thought.
and this is the thing that's been so focused on for Nashville for so long, and it feels like this is their chance. And we just all need to breathe through it. We need to breathe through it. Coming up, Emma and I are going to lay out our reasons why it would be a very bad idea to try to trade up from number 5 in the draft, and it actually has a lot to do with what some of our Locked On co-hosts have to say. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Wonderful Pistachios. If you are looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, my friends, you have got to crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I personally have told you I am a no shells variety kind of girl. It is a perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether you are sitting at your desk working, you're in the car running some errands, and you just hit that point where you know you need a little bit of protein. It is the perfect go-to snack. But if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, they have a great in-shell option that is also a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, Emma, understandably, people are like, we need the highest pick possible because we need the 1C that is going to remedy so much of what has plagued the Nashville Predators for decades. And we get that. Here is my reason number 1 why you don't want to do that. And that is this particular draft. This draft, I think general consensus is the number 1 player is Schaefer. He is a defenseman. And then you have Michael Misa, who is this forward / he's played some center as well. But the other thing you need to know is that this is actually a relatively center heavy draft at the top. In the top 10, you are looking at like really an outstanding defenseman and then some really talented centers. Not one of them is named, looks like, or is projected to be Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, or you know what I'm saying? Like, this is not a Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini necessarily draft, but it is a very heavy center forward top 10 with a lot of talent in it. And I think Nashville can get at 5 as good as they could get at 2.
I agree. And I think, to further expand on that, I think the fact that, like you said, this is maybe not the heaviest draft at the top in terms of like, oh, there's, like a Celebrini or a Bedard or someone at the top, but it is center heavy, which means that the second best or the third best center in this year's draft is going to be a lot better than the second or third best center in last year's draft or the year before. Like it's about quantity, like you said earlier in the show. And so I think it's just important to remember in general that all draft classes are not created equal. And again, I still keep going back to it's going to be really hard for them to mess up the number 5 pick. Like, right. I would understand, like, I quite honestly would be more on the side of the people who are stressing and sweating this pick if the Preds were picking like 15th. I'd be like, I get it. That's stressful because they could easily mess that up. But I think when you're in the top 5, it's going to be real hard to do that.
Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes, friends. And there are a number of young players in this draft that have the potential to, I'm not necessarily saying they have the potential to be a top tier elite 1C necessarily, but they have the talent to compete for a top 6 role in the NHL based on what we know of them at 18 years old, where they're playing right now. And again, wizardry. There is just some wizardry in this. Here's another reason why I absolutely don't think the Predators should trade up on draft night. And that is because if they do, they will get robbed. There is not going to be a team interested. So I did a little asking around the water cooler, friends. I talked to Gil from Locked On Islanders. I talked to JD from Locked On Sharks, Jack from Locked On Blackhawks, and Robin from Locked On Mammoth, Utah. Just so you know, we're making the change, Robin. We're getting there. And I said, let me just ask you this one question and then tell me your answer. How likely is your general manager to entertain, not necessarily take, but just to consider a deal with Nashville to trade spots? And I gave them 4 options. A, ain't happening. B, they may take the call, but it's going to be a real short conversation. C, could be a legitimate consideration. Or D, they'd probably like to get a package and adjust down a few spots. And I said, so tell me, what's your answer and why? Because I'm just curious, because nothing happens unless a team wants it to happen with you. You are not an island, you need
the right dance partner.
Yes. You need the right dance partner. They're not dancing. Just in case you were wondering, the New York Islanders, first of all, they don't even have a general manager. They're just floating out there.
There's also that.
But Gil was like, look, whoever is the general manager likely knows Barry Trotz, because everybody does, and maybe would take a courteous phone call, but really, no, they're going to pick first in this draft. If you're the New York Islanders, you are picking first in this draft.
Talk about a blind squirrel finding a nut, and that is the New York Islanders and the number 1 pick. What? How much do you think? I wish I could be a fly on the wall wherever Lou Lamoriello was when he learned that right after he resigned mutually, whatever the wording was, but yes, he resigned his position as GM, and then they found out they were getting the number 1 pick. There would probably be some language not approved by upper management after that. I mean, that's just so funny to me. I mean, sorry, Lou, but that's funny.
Note to self, when I become a general manager in the NHL, I will not resign or part ways until I know my draft pick, because I want to pick number 1.
Yes.
Well,
I'd be like, dude, can I come back?
Just for a minute.
Like, for a day.
Just for a minute. You don't have a guy yet, so I could come back. But yeah, New York Islanders, they are going to use that first pick in the draft. And it's going to benefit them, because you remember the Islanders are a team that was like battling to make the postseason. So, they're like, yeah, we'll take a little boost here. San Jose, our good friend JD Young. Y'all, JD Young is delightful. If you aren't listening to Locked On Sharks, he is hilarious. His thing, it ain't happening. That's a big fat A, not happening. He said GMs don't trade top 10 picks unless it is for a star player. Unless you are willing, and I say this with all due respect, but especially after the season the Predators are coming off of, on their current roster, Nashville does not have a star player that the San Jose Sharks would trade the second overall draft pick for. And that's just what's real. Like, they're just
also,
not gonna.
I feel like that points to, just take one step back further, it points to the larger conversation here, which is that people seem to be throwing out this idea of trading up from number 5 as if trading top 10 picks is something that happens with any kind of regularity, which it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Like, well, you could trade. It's like, they could, but also, like, I don't know. Also, Anne could become a Sidney Crosby fan. Like, again, like things are possible.
Things just don't happen.
They just don't happen. So I'm like, can we like take a little bit? Like, I love the enthusiasm, but can we like maybe take a reality pill for a second?
Yeah. Well, and remember, like you in this scenario, you have like a porterhouse steak in front of you, and somebody's like, "Hey, you want a Pop-Tart?"
Okay, I mean, number 5 pick, maybe not a Pop-Tart, but maybe like
no, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Do you want a chicken breast?
do you want? Yeah,
like,
do you want
okay.
some chicken breast? It's wrapped in bacon.
Yeah.
No,
No.
you want to eat your porterhouse. Yeah, San Jose, beat it. That's basically JD's kind message does beat it. I talked with Jack Bushman, Chicago, Locked On Blackhawks, great show. He said the Blackhawks would have to be absolutely wowed to move off of that 3rd pick. He said, they missed out on the top 2. Maybe they would take a call, but he's like, we want a 3rd pick. And we would have to be wowed. And again, I come back to, and I say this with love and respect, nothing that happened with any of the players on Nashville's current roster that could be a part of a trade package wowed anybody, including the Nashville Predators fans this year. There is no wow. There's no wow. There's no porterhouse steak.
There was no positive wow. There was a lot of wow.
There was a lot of whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. We had some of that. Yeah. Now, talk to Robin, Locked On Mammoth, and she said maybe kind of a hybrid of B and C, in the sense that you go ahead and call. Like, we're not rude. We'd pick up the phone, but you would have to have a tangible, high-level asset involved, and that would mean an impact roster player as a must. Nashville Predators don't have, nor are they going to trade an impact roster player.
If anything, they are trying to get impact roster players. They just don't have that. And I mean, especially after this last season, nothing that anyone did on the Predators roster is going to warrant like, oh, I'll listen and think about giving you my 4th round or my top 4 pick. No.
Nothing.
Also, quite honestly, the difference from moving from 5th up to 3rd, like, again, I come back to in this year's draft, if it was going to happen where you fall to number 5, that's still really good. If it's going to happen, you want it to happen this year of all years, because it's not like there's a Bedard, there's a Celebrini, there's a next year it's going to be Gavin McKenna, although he's a winger, but still, I'm sure the Preds would love to have him. Anyone would. But the point is, like, if it's going to happen, this is the year you want it to happen.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing I will say is if people are like, what about putting some of the picks together in the first round? I, again, go back to quantity is going to be key in this draft because you can. And I don't think combining picks is going to get you more quality that is worth giving up those picks. The other thing I will say is that Nashville is not likely to trade a high level prospect because I don't think they necessarily have one that somebody's like, oh, and not saying that they're bad. I mean, the Nashville Predators prospect pool is ranked in the top 10 in the NHL, but there is not one player in particular. That is the summary of the prospects make them top 10. So I would say that. So it's just not for us. It's just not for us trading up. 5 pick is going to bring you somebody impactful, somebody who has as much potential to impact the team down the road as the 3rd pick. And I think it's going to be a player that Nashville Predators fans can get excited about. The timeline might not be as exciting as we would want, but the player and the potential, I think, will. So let's all just embrace 5. I'm not going to lie. I was there. I was like, this blows when we got the 5th overall pick. I was like, could you just stick it to the man more, NHL? And they said, no, we actually couldn't mathematically, but we're going to get somebody good. And there's no point in finagling. Now, how do you know you're getting someone good? Well, of course, you look at stats and you look at charts and you look at projections, and they do tons of scouting. But there is an element of intangibles that matter when you're looking at these prospects. Coming up, we are going to share with you some questions that we have cultivated from our insiders that would help the Nashville Predators scouts understand which players have the most valuable intangibles. All right, Emma. So Nashville is probably not going to trade the 5th overall pick, our lips to Barry Trotz's ears. But what are they going to look for? Well, obviously, they're going to look for somebody who could potentially step into a center role. They're going to look for an offensive player, unless for some weird reason Schaefer drops to 5. I've seen a mock draft where that happened, and I'm like, that was a computer. That was not a person. Who made that up? That's not real.
AI isn't all the way there yet, everybody. It's
Yeah,
still
like,
not all the way there.
I like now. So what makes the Nashville Predators say this is a guy that we are really interested in? What are the off ice intangibles? Well, when we had a chance to talk with Jeff Kelty in some of the scouting department, I thought he had a really interesting comment and an interesting conversation about last year's first round pick, Igor Surin, and a conversation that they had with him off ice that impacted their interest in drafting him. This is what he had to say, and then we're going to come back and talk about this.
I'm really excited about him. I mean, it's exactly what we said about him when we drafted. You love to draft a player that has that top combination of skill, but compete, and he has both. That's really what attracted us to him last year. Matter of fact, when we interviewed him last year, his agency had brought him over to Florida for a camp right before the draft. And one of the questions that we asked him was, because he's over in Russia, doesn't see as much NHL hockey. The Stanley Cup playoffs or finals were going on at the time between Florida and Edmonton. And we asked him if he had the chance to watch some of the games and stuff. And he just lit up, and he loved, really the aspect he loved the most was how competitive and physical it was. So it kind of speaks to what he's all about.
When they are looking at these draft picks, obviously skill matters, but they are looking for these other intangibles. Emma, what are some of the top things that are those immeasurable intangibles that these scouts are trying to learn about some of these players, especially a guy that they may take in the top 10?
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for that compete level. They're looking for a level of maturity and poise. And obviously they're all kids, so they're not, you don't expect them to be perfect, but you want to see how they handle adversity and how they are with their teammates, and if they're respected by their teammates, if they're coachable. There's so many different things that go into it. I mean, look at again, not exactly the same, but look at what just happened in the NFL with Fedor Sanders. Now, I also think a lot of people thought he was better than he was because of his dad, but still, the main reason he fell as low as he did was because he had some really poor pre-draft interviews, and that matters to teams because they want to see what you're all about. They want a guy who's a team player, and they want a guy who kind of fits what they're looking for organizationally.
Yeah. And you get that in conversations with these young players. And again, they're 18 years old. Bless their hearts. They are 18 years old, and they are sitting down with NHL scouts who will take their answers and determine whether their dreams are going to come true or not. That's a lot of pressure for an 18-year-old going through this. We wanted to just have some fun with this. And so we reached out to our Locked On Predators insider community, and we said, hey, look, these scouts are going to be sitting down at the NHL Combine. They have meetings scheduled with a number of the top 10 picks and, going to have conversations. This will not be the first time that these scouts have had conversations with several of these players. They have conversations going as they, scout them and watch them and all of that. So it's not like walking into a room with a bunch of strangers. It's a little bit like that, but not exactly like that. Okay. And so we asked our insiders, what questions would you want to ask if you were a Predator scout sitting down in one of those interviews with these young players that would help you measure an intangible, get some sort of information out of them that would help you understand their off ice contributions or challenges. And I thought we got some really great answers, Emma. Here is one. I would ask about the teams he has been on and how they performed. I would be looking for a lot of we answers as opposed to I answers. I want team first guys, Ryan O'Reilly, not Patrick Laine. And I thought that is sneaky good. That is a sneaky good question.
It is. I think that it's one of those things that, like I said, you want a guy who's team first and not just like when you talk about goals and like, oh, that's, I want to do this. I want to do this. Like, yes, it's personal goals, but you understand that if your goal is to win a Stanley Cup, you're not doing that by yourself. And, you want to make an impact on the team. So I think that, that is a good question to ask.
I thought that was great. Here's another one that I think is fabulous. What do you do to step away from the game and recharge during the season? So, do you have hobbies, interests outside of hockey? And this feels a little bit like a double-edged sword to me because on the one hand, scouts, coaches are like, oh, you want a guy that's just all about hockey, all about hockey, all about hockey. But you also do not want a guy who is all about hockey, all about hockey, all about hockey. And we know this because we watched it in the Predators locker room this season, Emma. Those guys were getting it handed to them in hockey, and they had to figure out, where do I find joy and where do I refuel to come back in when hockey is not giving you what you feel like you were putting into it. It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have an outlet. You need to have other things. I think that's especially important now in not even just hockey, but youth sports in general, I think have become so specialized at such a young age. And a lot of it is the parents who are convinced by some, really good salesman of a agent or tournament director or something that, oh, if your kid does X tournaments a year, then they are going to be the next Nathan MacKinnon. And it's like, no, you know what? Like, probably no one is going to be the next Nathan MacKinnon. So I think that kids can get burnt out at such a young age. So like, yes, you can be passionate about something, but it not be your entire like being, because I think you need to have other things. And that's honestly like, even it's not just with young players. I think it's with some older players too. Like certain guys you kind of worry about when they retire, because it's like, ooh, what are they, how are they going to be fulfilled?
What is there?
Yeah.
What is there? Yeah, I think that's a whole podcast. We really need to dive into that one day because I have thoughts on that. This whole conversation of what brings you joy outside of hockey makes me think of Fedor Svetchkov. And the Milwaukee Admirals just dropped a video, and you can find it on Twitter, of quotes and comments from Fedor Svetchkov after that overtime game winner. And you all, Emma and I, will protect him at all costs, because he said, I was smiling the whole time. Even during overtime, I was smiling the whole time because I've been in the same spot in my PlayStation character so many times. And I just wanted to know what it felt like in real life. So he has PlayStation joy, I guess. I don't know, Fedor.
He's still, can someone please get him that big dog that he wants? Like, I just want him to experience that joy.
Yes. Ugh. Yeah. You know what, Emma? Maybe it's going to be us. Maybe it's going to be us that does that. We'll have to talk to his wife first. You always got to clear it with the wife first before you show up with the dog. But maybe
you can do a trial run with upper management if he wants.
That's a great idea. Don't let her hear that. She might not be in favor. Although, here's the thing. I bet if she went to Fedor Svetchkov's, she'd be like, I don't know if I'm coming home. Not because she doesn't love you, but because she's like, wait, he adores me too.
Oh, she would trade me for a tennis ball in a heartbeat. So don't give her that much credit. But yes, I'm sure she would love it. And everyone loves her, because who wouldn't? Who doesn't?
She is a doll. Here's another great question that I think, again, sneaky revelations here. What One question would be, what are you most proud of and why? This helps you understand a person's values when they tell you the thing that they most closely want to be identified with. I love that. I think this is good. You all are really good. Here is another one. This is a work interview question. What is something that you have bonded over with current or former teammates? Because it takes the pressure off of that. What is your favorite? Blah, blah, blah question, or what is the best yada, yada, yada question. And it just kind of reveals relationship. It can tell you like, hey, I bonded really closely with my teammate about this, or like, hey, I'm a little bit of a jokester. My teammate and I had this thing going. And I think it reveals a personality thing, which I thought that was great. One final question. This is from one of our insiders' daughters. And I was like, okay, we're getting some smart people young here. What or who was your favorite player and your inspiration for how you wanted to mold your playing style as a kid? That gives you insight into who do they want to model their game after. And it's not even necessarily so much on ice details, but like when I think about Ryan O'Reilly, I of course think of on ice things, but I also think the thing we hear the most about Ryan O'Reilly is what he does off ice. I think is what people who are around him mostly associate with him. And I just think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think going back to the one about bonding, like what have you
Mhm.
bonded with teammates over? I like that one too because it doesn't necessarily have to be a positive thing. Like it could be like maybe, like trauma bonding. I don't know. Like I'm not saying actual trauma, but it's like, yeah, we had a really difficult season. This happened, and we got stronger from it or whatever. I think that it kind of lets them. I like the open-ended questions like that where you kind of let the player take it where they want to take it.
Yeah. There is so much information you want to glean ahead of making that 5th overall pick. And it doesn't just have to do with statistics on the ice, it has to do with who they are as people. And then comes the challenge of, are you going to develop them into a piece that is going to be long-term and positive for the Nashville Predators? And there is a hitch in the giddy up for some Nashville Predators fans. Do the Predators develop players, specifically forwards, well? On tomorrow's show, we're going to take a look back at the last 10 years of drafting and see where the Nashville Predators may have gone right or gone wrong. What can we learn from previous drafts and development of players? It's going to be a little bit of a spicy conversation because there are big feels about this. But before we log off on this Tuesday, still Tuesday, friends, but happy Thursday coming up, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingan, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that is going to do it for this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be talking about drafting and development. It's going to be a good one. We'll see you then.